What's going on, Summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides video. I'm Kangas, and today I'm going over specific counter picks of some of the more popular and OP champions on patch 11.11. We'll cover the runes, builds, and playstyles to effectively counter specific matchups so that the next time you run into these characters, you'll have the game knowledge and confidence to bully your opponents. Now hit that sub button, and let's get right into it.
So let's start things off at the top lane with the most degenerate pick on the list, Karma as an answer to Shen. One of the biggest troubles with trying to beat Shen is that he's just too well-rounded as a duelist. Against melee champions, he can easily force trades pretty much anytime they move up the farm. And since he's a tank, he naturally itemizes against them in a way that makes him deal a lot of damage to them while they can't really do much to fight back. So as a result, they never get to outscale and he's a split push menace. But taking a ranged champ usually isn't that much better. You may have the push advantage early, but eventually his passive shield and W's block zone help him mitigate lots of your damage, and once he's tanky enough later in the game, you're never going to be able to do anything to him. So with Karma, we're bypassing all of that. Instead of trying to beat Shen 1v1 in lane phase or even as a side laner, you're instead just going to take the free farm from lane and convert that into being a support to enable your team. Early game Karma has some of the best pushing power in the game thanks to her Q, specifically when you have your mantra ready. You'll just constantly shove in waves to completely neutralize the 1v1 matchup. Just remember that when you play any type of auto shove playstyle, the goal is to shove and then back off, not whack the tower. Not only does this leave you open to Shen engaging on you, but it also makes it pretty likely that you're going to die to ganks. So shove, ward, and then either roam or reset, unless you're absolutely sure that there's no chance you die to a gank. And once you're out of lane, you'll look to group up like any other enchanter, with the added chore of actually catching crashing waves when you need to. For the build, you'll start off with Doran's Ring, then rush Lucidity Boots, and build into a Shirelia's and Staff of Flowing Water. Your next two items should be Ardent Censer and Rabadon's Death Cap, but you can flex a build a bit if you need other items like Mikhail's, Zhonya's, or Cosmic Drive. And quick aside, the reason that we do these kinds of videos is because having counter picks like this ready to go for ranked are a huge part of climbing the ladder. It's a really bad feeling when you know you're going to lose from champ select because you just don't know how to deal with the one specific champion that you weren't able to ban away. But just being ready to lock in the counter isn't always enough on its own. You also have to know what to do with those champions to get that dub. We do our best to give you the rundown in these counter meta videos, but of course we can't cover every specific matchup. We don't have all day. But don't worry, we still got you covered. If you check out ProGuides.com, you can sign up with any of our challenger or master level coaches and book a session so that they can walk you through exactly what you should be doing in laning phase to mid game to late game, yada yada. We even got a discount going on right now, so if you use RankUp 2021, that gets you 20% off of your subscription. So if you haven't tried it out before, try it out now. It's a good time. So our second pick for the top lane matchup is Fiora into Camille. Where Karma was more of an answer, a pick to just kind of bypass your lane opponent's strength to play your own game, Fiora into Camille is the type of counter where you want to use your skills to outplay and beat down your counterpart. This is straight up what I like to call an ego pick. While it is Fiora favored, it's not a mindless right-click and win situation. You need to actually outplay the Camille in order to win the game, but when you net that solo kill and start splitting to win that game, you'll get the small but satisfying boost to your ego. There are two key points that make Fiora the winner in these trades. The first of those points is when you're dealing with the more passive Camille players that try to win the sustain game. You can use your Q to outplay every single one of Camille's W's. Anytime she goes for a sweep, she's in range of your Q range, so just lunge in and jab her. Even if you aren't proccing a vital, it beats taking the empowered part of Camille's W every time. Once you're in close, you also win out on short trades thanks to your E and can use your W to block her second Q. The next thing that you have going for you is just how telegraphed Camille's CC is. When Camille's more on the aggressive side and trying to use her E onto you, wait for her to leave the wall and then use your parry. Some Fiora players panic and parry the instant Camille lands on the wall, but a good Camille will know to hold the second part of her dash for a split second before releasing. So the only way that you lose here is preemptively parrying that way. Also, with a long hang time on her ult before you actually get caged, it's really easy to block as well, which can be absolutely massive for escaping from ganks that would otherwise be a guaranteed death due to the lockdown. Once you build up a lead and reach the mid to later stages of the game, you should easily take over. Press your lead and press it hard. Don't be that Fiora that just pushes and goes back to base every time a wave crashes. Limit test and learn how hard you can carry and bully your opponent, even looking to dive when you know that they don't have a team backing her up. For items in this matchup, you'll start with Doran's Blade, and then for Mythic, you're strictly 1v1ing, so you can go Trinity Force. If you're going to be grouping up, you'll want to consider Stride Breaker for sticking to targets, or even Gore Drinker if targets can be easy to get onto. After your Mythic, you'll build into Ravenous Hydra, Death Stance, and Steric's Gauge. The standard last item is Guardian Angel, but you can also go for a more aggressive item like Blade of the Ruin King, or a defensive one like Randuin's Omen or Spear of Visage. Next up, we got some jungle counters, but first, obvious disclaimer, jungle can be largely influenced by lane priority, so this video is assuming that neither laners are budging from their lanes to come and decide the fight. Not the most realistic, I know, but hey, we do what we can. So the first jungler we're looking to counter is Lee Sin. Now this champ has been an incredible dominant laner and jungler recently, and while the changes on this patch definitely hurt lane Lee Sin a little bit, jungle Lee Sin is nearly entirely unaffected. But don't worry, with Gragas you can completely shut down everything that Lee Sin wants to do. First off, Gragas' jungle clear speed can come pretty close to matching Lee's pace, meaning that with decent tracking and pathing skills, you should always be able to counter gank or at least mirror his pressure on the other side of the map. On top of that, you just directly counter his kit. Yeah, in a 1v1 setting, you don't straight up win against Lee Sin. Unless you're super fed, you won't be bursting him down, and he will outsustain your damage and win the extended trades. On top of that, it's also hard to react to his second Q from point blank range, where the damage is practically instant. But it's also very hard for Lee to force fights onto you when you aren't forcing them yourself. If he tries to go in on you from range, you'll have plenty of time to react by just body slamming him out of his Q, and then use your barrel to slow him and waddle back to safety. But when you fight with your teammates, that's where you really start to shine. Your goal in fights will be to completely neutralize Lee Sin. When he lands a Q on any ally, you'll want to stand straight on top of them and then use your E to swat him out of the air. By preventing him from ever connecting his Q, it's way harder for Lee Sin to find a way to pick off one of your teammates into his team to secure the kill, even when he has flash up. In the event that he does somehow get past you to your carries and he kicks them towards his team, you can then use your ult to scatter the entire enemy team when they try and dogpile on your carry. This will buy your ally much needed time to get back to the safety of your team. Now for the build, you'll start off with Hailblade and then build into Night Harvester and Sork Shoes. But if you want the more aggressive item first, you can also go for Lichbane, though it's generally a bit safer to go Zhonya's and then Lichbane. Unless maybe you're really fed and can one-shot combo some squishy members. Next up, you'll go Void Staff, and then you'll finish off your build with Rabadon's Death Cap. Personally, I'm really happy Gragas is back to being an AP champion. It feels way more fun to play as, and more fair to play against compared to the yucky, hate-stacking full tank Gragas that we were seeing just a few patches ago. And that's sort of my take in general. If a champ can be played as tank or carry, I always find it more fun to see them played as carries. But I'm curious what our viewers have to say about that as well, so let me know in the comments. So our second jungler matchup is Karthus as an answer to Shaco. The first thing you gotta note in this matchup is that you will absolutely not out-pressure him in terms of ganks. He will gank, and he will gank a lot. Instead, your goal is just to try and track him as best as you can and communicate with your team where he is. If you just turn off your brain and AFK farm, he will start to snowball, and there's a good chance that you'll lose. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what makes this matchup good. Well, yeah, he can pressure your lanes, Shaco really struggles to pressure you in any meaningful way. If he uses his Q to go in on you, he doesn't have a way to back out, so once you exhaust him, he's pretty much shit out of luck. And you win that fight as long as you don't miss your Qs. With him being unable to look to fight you, you'll pretty much be able to power farm at your leisure. One small win as Karthus is that Shaco's boxes are kinda useless. While he isn't as box-centric as AP Shaco, AD Shaco can still drop that one box that completely decides a fight by fearing a Lee Sin mid-Q or a Camille right as she hookshots into the enemy team. With Karthus though, you just sit back, peppering the enemy team with your Qs and waiting for them to come to you. And once you're actually in team fights, there's nothing Shaco can do to you at this stage of the game. Even if he's insanely fed, Shaco builds glass cannon, so by the time he kills you, he's pretty much melted to death in your defile. What little HP he has left, you can finish him off in your passive. The only thing to watch out for in this matchup is his ult cooldown. If he has his ult, he can completely negate yours with good timing. For items, you'll start off with Hailblade, then build into Leandre's Anguish, Sork Shoes, and Zhonya's. We normally get Zhonya's later in our Karthus build in most games, but against a glass cannon assassin like Shaco, making him sit in Defile for an extra 2.5 seconds pretty much guarantees his death. He may even die before he has a chance to kill you at all. Anyway, after Zhonya's, pick up Void Staff and Rabadon's for a huge spike in damage, and then finish up your build with either Demonic Embrace or Morellonomicon. Now for the mid lane, we're picking up Malzahar as our counter to Sylas. Did I call Karma the most degenerate pick? This one might take the cake. Despite a super strong pushing later in the game, Malza actually doesn't have very much lane strength early on at all. Usually giving Sylas a free lane is a pretty bad idea due to his insane scaling, but with Malzahar it's well worth it for two primary reasons. First, Mal's ult is just awful for any melee fighter to deal with. Champs like Sylas, Fiora, and Riven are pretty squishy, but make up for that squishiness with high mobility and sustain to allow them to survive and carry in teamfights. But the second you lock them down with Malzahar, they get blown up. And yeah, QSS can counter that, but since it only builds into AD items, it's very rare to see solo queue players that are willing to buy it on an AP champion like Sylas. And even if they do, they're paying a tax that delays their next item power spike. And the second reason that Malz is good into Sylas is because Mal's ult just isn't a great option for Sylas to steal. Malzahar is a ranged champion, so he can get out all of his damage from max range. On top of that, he has his passive Veil to block interruptions. Sylas, on the other hand, needs to get into the fray to dish out his damage, so unless he's ulting right away to start the fight, odds are he's going to be in range as somebody that can instantly interrupt it. So for items on Malzahar, you'll be starting off with Doran's Ring and go back for Lost Chapter as soon as you have gold for it. Chapter is a really nice power spike on any mage that builds it, but with Malzahar in particular, it's especially important as it enables the constant spam and back off playstyle that lets you completely neutralize your laning phase. Build that chapter into a Liandry's, then grab Sorc Shoes and Oblivion Orb. Next, build towards Demonic Embrace, Void Staff, and Rabadon's, and then complete your Merlinomicon. So Malzahar is an extremely effective way to neutralize a lot of champions that have otherwise hard to deal with kits. The low interaction lane phase means that you are not trying to ego challenge your opponents in any 1v1s. You just want to coast by, use your ult to get free kills with your jungler, and then look to shut down your opponents in teamfights. And I can definitely see why that playstyle doesn't appeal to everyone, so that brings us to today's question of the day. What champ do you find absolutely snooze-fest boring? Whether that's boring to play as or against, I want to know what Resident Sleeper you think is the worst in the comments below. As a support player, mine's probably got to be like a Kog'Maw Zillion combo or something like that, but I'm curious what y'all have to say. So moving on to our second mid lane counter, we got Malphite as an answer to Zed. We usually try and give types of carry options for dealing with assassins, but this time we decided to give you a tank pick instead. In solo queue, you aren't always going to get teammates that make the best drafting decisions. We've all seen that last pick insta-lock an AD assassin with 3 other AD champions on the team at least once or twice, or a few hundred times. But Malphite's OP engage is welcome in literally any comp. So if you can also have a hard winning lane that totally shuts down a snowball reliance assassin, why not take 2 birds with 1 stone? Zed wins lane by constantly harassing his lane opponent, whittling them down with Q poke, and then looking for all-ins with his ult. On top of that, he has really good pushing power with the AoE from his Q and E, so even if he can't guarantee a kill on an opponent, he can usually outroam them. But with Malphite, you're just going to aim to overpower everything he does. Your Q poke can allow you to match his damage in trades, but since he has to get through your passive shield, you easily win the health exchange. Just be sure to sit back and wait for your shield recharge once it depletes. If Zed tries to shove the wave over trading with you, you just walk up and contest him. Your QE hits harder than his, especially after you start stacking up armor to mitigate the damage that he does and buff your E damage. And once you have ults, the key in this lane is to rarely, if ever, use yours first. If you do, he can just react to your ult with his own, dodging it and potentially even killing you with his combo if it's still early game and you don't have enough tank items. Instead, hold your ult until he uses his, and then immediately use it before his recast window comes up. His mobility makes it hard to lock him down in teamfights, but you can play instead to peel with your backline. If you ult right after he does, you can catch him out before he can dash back to his shadow. Even if he does blink back out, being forced out so quickly may prevent him from actually getting the kill with his ult. For your items in this lane, you'll start Corrupting Potion and then build into Balmy Cinder and Plated Steel Caps. Upgrade Cinder to Frostfire Gauntlet and then build into Thornmail and straight up Frozen Heart. Your next 2 items are just meant to make you as tanky as possible, so they can vary based on the enemy team comp, but the 2 best generalist items are Randuin's Omen and Abyssal Mask. Now moving things down to the bot lane, we have another disclaimer. Obviously bot lane carries are heavily influenced by the supports and vice versa, so you won't just be running at each other to fight in a 1v1. These counters are more about how you win small trades and all-ins bot lane, assuming that there isn't an overwhelming amount of support difference on either side. So the first laner that we need to counter is Jhin. Jhin has been one of, if not the best AD carry for most of Season 11 and even a lot of Season 10. He's got tons of bullying strength for lane and he scales really well. Basically, he just beats up other early game AD carries, but also doesn't fall off too hard, so hyper carries struggle to catch back up. There's basically no reliable counter in the standard marksman pool. So that's why we're not picking a standard marksman, we're picking Swain. Everything about Swain makes him an incredible dominant bot lane pick with pretty much no losing matchups in the lane. His Q gives him pretty strong pushing power, able to either match or outshove other champs in the lane. Jhin has particularly bad wave clear, especially early game, so you can easily take control of how you want to play the lane. But winning the wave control battle usually isn't enough to be called dominant. So what makes Swain such a true bully is that if an AD carry moves up to farm, they're pretty much always in danger of dying. If you can land 1 E on Jhin, it makes it really easy to land the rest of your combo. This alone will deal a huge chunk of damage, and if your support's ready to follow up, can almost be a guaranteed kill. And most mages are susceptible to being all-in, but Swain is pretty much a bruiser anyway. Even when being locked down by a full support combo and Jin's W, as long as you get your ult off, you'll usually be able to heal through their damage and turn the fight in your favor. For items, you'll want to start off with Doran's Ring, build into Lost Chapter, pick up Sorc Shoes, and then upgrade Chapter into Liandry's. After that, you'll go right into Zhonya's and Demonic Embrace. After that, build Void Staff and Rabadon's Death Cap. You could buy defensive items like Spirit Visage or Frozen Heart, but it's generally best to just go full AP, since more AP means more healing with his ult anyway. And our second bot lane counter is Draven into Tristana. Tristana's ability to jump in and burst down a target means that just a single misstep in lane against her can result in a death. Given that most bot lanes in the current meta are immobile hyper carries and lots of supports prefer enchanters, she can usually convert that kill into a snowball that results in her rolling over your entire team. So stopping a snowball that big is pretty impossible. So let's talk about how to use Draven as a preventative measure to stop it from happening in the first place. First, to know how to play against Tristana, think about what she wants to do. Triss wants to get in range, use her jump to Goomba Stomp you, and then use her explosive charge to quickly burst you down. But as Halo Blade's Draven, you easily beat Tristana out as long as you have double axes. Just be sure that you don't drop them while farming and you can't lose. Aside from out damaging her in trades, you can also counter her mobility. Whether she's jumping on your face or escaping from an unwinnable fight, a well-placed E can knock her out of the sky and even help you secure the kill. For your items in this lane, you'll start off with Doran's Blade, then build into Immortal Shield Bow, Berserker's Greaves, Collector, and Infinity Edge. Next up, build Lord Dominic's Regards, and you'll top off your build with either Rapid Fire Cannon, Bloodthirster, or Mercurial Scimitar, whichever fits your game best. And like I already said, disclaimer for supports, obviously not a 1v1 lane. These are impacted by your AD carries, so we're just trying to focus on what supports kind of counter each other in those 1v1 settings. So we're just trying to take a look at which supports are more impactful against each other. So the first matchup we'll be looking at is Seraphine into Lulu. Let's get one thing straight about going up against Lulu. You cannot outdo her in terms of mega buffing a hyper carry to roll over a team. One option is to play kill lane and try and stomp her to the ground, but that's completely reliant on having the better AD carry, so it's kind of inconsistent. So instead of matching her ability to buff up a single teammate, we look to go for an option that enables the entire team to overpower team fights. With the direct buff to Seraphine and indirect buffs to her items this patch, she is by far the best pick for this niche. While you won't be able to force all ins, you can start the game off strong by going around Lulu's strengths. She does well in both bursty trades with her EQ combo and extended fights where she can get value out of picks. But with Seraphine, you can actually outrange Lulu with Q poke. If she ever moves up to try and force a trade on you, simply use E to poke her even more and kite back with the slow. You can also play to outpush Lulu and her AD carry, with Q spam easily allowing you to push them under tower so that you can play to harass them. Once out of lane, you'll just continually play around everything that Lulu wants to do. While she does do a great job of preserving her carries against divers, she can't do anything against things like Seraphine's ult. Just play fight slow and look to line up a big ult to CC the entire enemy team. Instead of worrying just about Lulu's AD carry, you're now helping your entire team front to back roll over your opponents. For your items, you'll start off with Spell Thief's Edge, Rush Lucidity Boots, then build into Moonstone Renewer, and after that, Staff of Flowing Water and Ardent Sensor to buff up your entire team. Finally, top off your build with a new Vigilant Wardstone. And if you really need Mikhail's and feel like you can actually use it properly, you can drop either Staff or Ardent for it. With the new changes, you do not want to give up the Control Ward slot from Wardstone. And finishing off the list, we have Xyra into Thresh. Thresh is able to flex between going in for aggression and playing defensive to peel against kill lane opponents like Leona and Nautilus. But he struggles pretty poorly against poke mages who can easily shove him and his carry in and then poke him under tower. Out of all the hook champions, his has the most windup, making it the hardest to hit on a mage standing at max range. If he tries to move up, you can just throw out your E to root him, with your plants dishing out some punishment. If you're quick enough, you can even block his hook with your plants. As all around as he is, he just cannot do anything as long as you position correctly. After level 6, Thresh usually would look to flash all in with his ult against most squishy champs. But his Xyra, even if he lands everything, you're able to at least trade back 1 if not 2 kills as long as you get out your combo before you're focused down. And out of lane, this trend continues. You play from too far for him to pick or peel against, and he's pretty much unable to do anything to you. He's not particularly tanky, so you'll shred through him in fights, and he can't stop you from freely dishing out damage. Basically, instead of thinking of it as a support versus support matchup, once you have your items, you just become an unimpeded AP carry. For your items, you'll start off with Spell Thief's Edge, and then build that into Sork Shoes and grab a Leandri's and Demonic Embrace. After that, get Void Staff and Vigilant Wardstone. If you're greedy, you can go for Rabadons as your last slot, but you're giving up a lot of control wards if you do. And if you go this route, at least sit on control wards until you have a full Rabadons ready to buy. Vision control is definitely worth more than just a single needlessly large rod.
And there you go, that'll conclude our latest episode of Counter Picks. Really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you sub to the channel so you never miss out on our meta guides and you're always in the loop of what the best picks are. Also remember to let me know what your favorite spell or combo is in the comments down below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our community Discord in the description box below where you can hang out, make friends, or just be part of the community. That's it for today, so best of luck on the Rift everybody, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.